So that piece I just played, I was thinking intervallically the whole time, okay? So what I mean by that is that I know the notes that I'm playing. I know the notes and how they relate back to the chord that I'm playing over. So when I started, I did something like, okay? I know what those notes are. I'm not thinking this is an E, this is an F sharp, this is a G. I'm not thinking like that. I'm thinking this is the 5, this is the 6, this is the flat 7. And I know how they're going to sound, and that's why it sounds good. So this video is going to explain to you all about intervals, what intervals are, and how we can incorporate them into our playing so that we sound super cool and very authentically bluesy. Intervals, what are they and why are they so important in the blues? For years I knew nothing about intervals. They were like a lost continent to me, or an undiscovered continent, and then when I discovered them, woo, it was very exciting because it brought a whole new dimension to my playing. A lot of people, and I expect a lot of people who are watching this video, will play blues out of pentatonic shapes and won't really know anything about the notes that they're using over the top of what they're playing. This is what intervals gives you. So understanding intervals allows you to understand every note that you're playing over the top of the chord that you're playing, and therefore you've got total control of it and you can create some really cool lines. Okay, so the way I'm going to demonstrate this, I'm going to demonstrate it off the 1 chord, but you can apply, and we'll talk about it a little bit, exactly the same to the 4 chord and the 5 chord. So when we're talking about intervals, we're always talking about intervals in relation to the major scale. So our first chord in the blues is an A7, so all the intervals will be related back to the A major scale. So this is the A major scale. Okay, so the intervals are just the 1, which is the A, the B, which is the 2, the C sharp, the 3, the D is the 4, the E is the 5, the F sharp is the 6, and the 7 is the A flat. Okay, I'm not saying we use those notes necessarily, I'm just saying those are the notes we refer to when we say the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5, the 6 and the 7. Obviously we have flat 3s, flat 7s, we might have sharp 5s, etc. But we're always referring back to the major scale. That's really important. That's number 1 thing. Right, so let's think about our A7 chord. Our A7 chord, we've got to understand the notes in it. So a dominant 7th chord, we need to understand how it's spelt. Okay, so spelling in terms of chords is knowing their intervals, right? So it's like knowing the letters in a word. In music, it's about knowing the intervals in a chord, right? So in this A7 chord, the intervals are 1, 3, 5, flat 7 of the A major scale. So let's look at that. We've got the 1, which is obviously A. There's the 2, that's not in the chord. The 3, so the C sharp is in the chord. The 4's not in the chord. The 5, okay, is in the chord. That's the E. The 6 isn't in the chord. Now there's the 7, but we want the flat 7th, so we've got to go down a fret. So it's a G. So these are the notes in the A7 chord. Now you can hear it already sounds quite bluesy, doesn't it? Sounds like the chord, right? And if we take the chord, there's our A note. That's the 1. That's the E, that's the 5th. Then that note, that's the G, that's the flat 7th. Okay, we've got this note in here, which is the C sharp. That is the major 3rd. We've got another E, another 5 in there. Another A, another 1. So some of the intervals are repeated in the chord. And it depends how you play the chord. I could play my A7 chord like that and just play the 1, the major 3rd and the flat 7th and omit the 5. It's still an A7 chord. You probably might know it there. So there's lots of different ways to play this A7 chord. I could play it there, for example. Alright? So when we're thinking about intervals, when we're playing over the top of this A7 chord, the important intervals are those that are in the chord. The 1, the 3, the 5 and the flat 7. Right? Now out of those, there are two really important ones and two less important ones. Now you think the root would be a really important one, but it isn't. Okay, it's not really important. The really important ones are the 3 and the flat 7. Why? Because they define the sound of the chord, right? So if we take away, if we think about, there's the 3 there, okay, and the flat, there's the flat 7, there's the 3, that defines the sound of the chord. If you play that, you can hear that that is an A dominant 7th chord, right? If I just play, say, the root and the 5, that's just like a regular power chord. But if we just play, that really defines the qualities of the chord, all right? Adding the root, well, certainly adding the 5. Adding the 5 doesn't provide any more harmonic information about the chord. You can forget the 5 altogether if you want. In jazz, this happens all the time. Often jazz players leave the 5 out because it doesn't add anything, all right? So when we're playing over the top of this, the key notes to play are the, all right, the flat 7 and the 3rd. Now, what you need to do is try and find these notes around. So there's a flat 7 and there's a 3rd. Well, where else have we got these notes? Yeah, well, we can think of this as a G and this is a C sharp as well. We've got one here, haven't we? We've got a G there. Oh, it's starting to sound quite bluesy, isn't it? There's another flat 3rd. There's not a flat 3rd, sorry, a major 3rd. There's one there. I can see you. They're kind of in a line, look, aren't they? Like a diagonal line. So those notes are going to sound really good. They're going to sound really good over the top of that A7 chord. I kind of stuck a few other notes in there as well, but I was focusing on that 3 and flat 7 to create that bluesy sound. So what you could do is you could put on, a really good idea is to put on an A7 drone. Now by that I mean, if you go to YouTube and you just type A7 drone, a track will come up that's just A7 going round and round and round, okay? And play around with it. And just play stuff like, just simple stuff like, alright, I'm really focusing on those notes. Right, the 3 and the flat 7. I can add the 5 in and I can add the 1 in. And also try and get a feel for how they sound. Yeah? Think how that major 3rd sounds, how that flat 7 sounds, because then you start targeting them on purpose. So those are really strong, really strong. They're your most characterful notes. So let's think about the other intervals that we can play over this dominant 7th chord. So far we can play the 1, the 3, the 5 and the flat 7. All right? Now we can also play the 2, which is the B, okay, which is there, and we've got one there as well. All right, so we can play that one. We played the 3. We can play the 4, but the 4 is going to be used more of as a passing note. I wouldn't play the 4 an awful lot. It's okay, it's fine. The problem with the 4 is it clashes with the major 3rd, okay? Because if you think the major 3rd is here and the 4 is here, if we're playing this chord and we play this note over the top of it, it's going to clash. Why? Because they're semitone apart. So let me demonstrate. So if I'm playing the chord, which has got a C sharp note in, let's lose that C sharp note there, and I play a D note over the top of it, I'll get this sound. It's pretty horrible. Alright, so that's why you need to be a bit careful with the 4th interval over a dominant 7th chord. I'm not saying you can't play it at all, even though it's actually called, technically it's called an avoid note. What that means is you can play it, but you don't want to land on it and stay there, okay? You can use it as a passing note. So for example, I could go from 3, I could go from the 3rd interval to the 5th interval via the 4th interval, but I wouldn't want to do this and just land on it, okay, because it's really going to clash with that major 3rd. So the 4th's okay, but be a bit careful with it, right? The 5th we've already talked about. The 6th is a cool interval, right? That's the last one that you can really play over this dominant 7th chord, right? So the 6, there's the flat 7, the 6 is just a fret below it. So that little phrase sounds really cool because of this 6th note. I'm going 6 up to the root, minor 3rd to major 3rd, 5th, root. But that sounds really cool and bluesy. Why? Because I'm thinking about the intervals I'm using. I'm thinking 6, root, minor third, major third, 5, 1. Then I'm kind of coming back down again. But every note that I'm playing, I've thought about it beforehand. Now you might be thinking, God, this is a right pain in the neck. I can't play my scales anymore. I've got to think about every note I'm going to play. It's going to take forever. Right? It will take quite a long time to absorb all this, but just do it in little chunks. You could, for example, let's make some really simple exercises. You could think, right, I'm going to play across this A7, A minor pentatonic, right, and just play my normal A minor pentatonic licks, but every so often I'm just going to target one of these notes, right? So we could do that with, let's put the backing track on. So I've gone onto YouTube and I found the backing track I was talking about, which is just an A7 going round and round. Okay, so I'm going to target the major third whilst playing A minor pentatonic. So there's my major third there. So I'm doing A minor pentatonic, but I just keep hitting that. Let's find another major third. There's one here. Target a different note. Let's think about I've got the major third, so I'm going to do the major third of it and then hit this flat 7 here. There's a flat 7. Okay, so now I'm doing the 3 and the flat 7. It sounds cool. So let's do the 6. The 6 is going to sound cool. There's the 6 there. Six. So what I did was I started off in just doing A minor pentatonic, which works fine over an A7 backing track, okay? And I play you can play your sort of favourite licks there, but then think, right, I'm just going to target the major third. We don't want to target all these intervals straight away, otherwise it's just way too confusing. So get used to playing that major third, getting used to finding where it is. And once you've got used to that, then you start thinking, okay, let's try the flat 7th, let's target that as well, maybe target that on its own. So once you've got that on its own, maybe target the 3rd and the flat 7th, right, as you're playing, and then add in some of these other intervals, right? And gradually you start playing in that way. So if you think of your minor pentatonic as a framework that you go back to when your brain's getting a bit fried and you can't find where all these intervals are, right, then as soon as you've done something in A minor pentatonic and your brain's got itself back in gear again, you think, right, let's start finding these 3rds and flat 7ths, let's play around with the 6th. Yeah, and they all sound cool in different ways. You can think of them, I sometimes think of them a little bit as cartoon characters maybe. So like the major third as like a very strong, colourful character. So maybe, I don't know, Homer Simpson. Is that a good example? I don't know. Or maybe Scooby-Doo. Scooby-Doo's always cool, right? So very strong, very characterful, lots of energy. The 4th, maybe you could treat someone a bit dodgy, so maybe the 4th would be the villain in Scooby-Doo, or Mr. what is he called, Mr. Burns, is he a villain in Simpsons? I don't know, not a big Simpsons fan. Perhaps I should be. So if you give them sort of characters, you'll understand them better. I think that's a really good idea. But a lot of this is rethinking about the way you play the blues, because I know a lot of people, and I did this for years, just play pentatonic stuff without really knowing what these notes are doing. Now you can do this in minor pentatonic as well. Perhaps we'll do that in another video. Now I also said at the start of the video that I'd be doing this just over the 1 chord, but we can do this over the 4 chord and the 5 chord. I'm not going to do that in this video because otherwise it's going to get really, really long. But you apply exactly the same sort of logic. But remember, over the 4 chord, which in this case would be D, right? The intervals are going to be coming from the D major scale. So it's exactly the same stuff, but you just apply it all to D, and then you apply it all to E. and then you're playing intervallically across the whole of the blues progression. But remember, you can mix that up with your minor playing. It really is a lot of fun. It's quite a long journey, and it can be frustrating at times, I won't lie, but it is really good fun, and it will open up your playing to new levels which you haven't yet reached. Okay, so hope you enjoy that. Please leave comments in the comment section below. It's always good to see comments, and hope you enjoy, and please remember to subscribe.